Welcome to the another exciting meeting at Interpersonal Toastmasters. Storytelling has been one of the techniques that used from the time of primitive times when people used to sit around the fire, lit the fire, and then they just used to talk while some food is cooking. They used to talk about whether they knew the language or not, whether it was sign language, whatever the language that they knew. There have been stories that have been lying and staying with the humanity. Their stories help people to go through the emotions or relive what the other person has been narrating them, or inspired them to be what they always wanted to be, the heroes of the unsung stories, or a different, whatever the emotions that the story could carry. Here today, we are going to talk about what are some things that we can do, make it effective, and also what are some techniques that we can apply in our storytelling. Let me share my screen. Before I start, I want to ask a question to each and every person. What does stories mean to you? What do you recollect as soon as someone says stories? Let me start with Sangeeta. Sangeeta, what do stories mean to you?
Story has something to take away from it, some message it could be, or somebody's experience, something to learn from it. It's a nice way of putting things together and conveying it to others. So it's easy to understand and remember and digest it. It's like a small chunk of information. It could be about anything that can be made and into a story and told as a story. Um,
Thank you very much. Piyush?
Yeah, to me, stories are something that helps you grasp a certain concept or understand a particular saying or a particular sort of what you're trying to explain it to somebody. But then if you say it in a form of story, that becomes much easier. For example, we have the story of a crow putting pebbles in a vessel and the water comes up. So to me, the takeaway is perseverance. If you are consistently doing something and without stopping, you will reach the goal. So to me, story is something that can help someone grasp a certain concept.
Thank you very much, Piyush. Grace?
For me, I think story is a narrative that you can learn from it. So, for example, it could be like something that happened to you, and then you're relaying that narrative to the person. And that person getting that narrative can learn from it, whether good or bad. It's a learning experience. It's a learning curve. So that is how I see a story goes.
Thank you very much. Diana, you can type in the chat what the story mean to you. Meanwhile, can I ask Linda? Hi, Linda. Welcome to the meeting.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So what do stories mean to you?
It means it's more of your personal experiences that you have and what your understanding of the situation is, and also maybe what you learned from your experiences.
We have to act, and we have to act steadily, and we have to.
Thank you. Catherine, what do stories mean to you?
Stories connect my memory. They connect my experiences. They help me have perspective. They help me relax. Some of them are sad, some of them are happy, some of them are meaningful. They give me a sense of direction. They steady my emotions. Stories define my way of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Clark, welcome to the meeting. Can you explain what those stories mean to you?
Hello. My name is Clark. I'm from the sister club, ESML SV Toastmasters. I'm here to, I saw your advertisement in our club mailing list. That's why I'm here. For me, stories is it's a device to communicate a message. That's usually, many story has a moral lesson to it. And so, yeah, it gives the people, the best stories are the one that only keep people entertained. It also teaches a lesson.
Thank you, Clark. Rosemary, welcome to the meeting. So we're talking about what do the storytelling mean to each one. Can you explain what does storytelling mean for you?
Wait, let me storytelling. What does storytelling mean for me? Storytelling is a way for me to explain things to some people who sometimes find it difficult to understand. And it is also a way I can listen to others and get the exact meaning of what they say without they having that long drawn out thing. So you could be telling a story. Let us say there is the hare and the tortoise, and you want to bring across a point where it is not always the person who is at the front who wins, but the person who presses on and is consistent in what they do. So you give a little story and then it is readily understood or easily understood by the other person.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Diana says, thanks to Toastmaster, my true story is my life, my emotions, and the school where I was bullied, being in a wheelchair. It has hurt a lot, me being an adult kid. Thank you, Diana. Stories mean to me the times when I always sat before my grandfather, grandmother, that moment, rather in the nights especially, waiting for each story to unfold, probably a moral, the same time the characters, the inspiration, or whatever the suspense it used to build, and we waiting for all the night, probably even just to be awake, hear what happened, what's next in the story. But let's hear some techniques that we can use to make our storytelling. 1 minute. So we are going to talk about few storytelling techniques today. And then we are also going to do some work around. So we expect more audience, but yeah, whatever we have here, we will do an exercise where few of you will work together and build a story and then we'll narrate it. So there are few techniques. The famous techniques is monomyth, the mountain, the nested loop, spark lines, and media res and petal structure. We're also going to talk about what are the best ways to narrate a story in your speeches. Now, coming to the first technique, if you look at stories like the Lion King are some stories that have been always fables or folk tales about some unsung heroes. It all talks about a hero leaving the place that they know. If you look at the picture here, it shows the known to unknown, their journey. They go there and then they face a lot of problems there. The struggle that they go through is explained, and then in the end, they come back to the home again. These are stories that helps the audience to go through a journey. And then you are going to use descriptive language here. It also helps to showcase the audience the risks that you are going to take. Going to a suspense story, same time it also shows the benefits of taking the risk in life. And if you are narrating a personal story or writing about some person, it shows what they've learned all the way. The journey that they took from the stage that they started being innocent and then to the state where they have gained the confidence, all that they learned, the wisdom to going through the struggle, being outside their home, or rather you can say your comfort zone. You're breaking your comfort zone. You're walking out of it. And whatever you gain through all that journey, and then coming back to the same place where you started, it shows that you have become a new leaf for what you were to be. This is one technique that you can use in your stories. Talk about one person's journey, whether it is you, whether it is someone else. For example, let us say you're using a icebreaker speech. If you want to add some stories, you can talk about this journey. I started from a place where I was so naive, but when I went through these struggles, I have learned so and so. And then you come back to the same place. Now I'm more confident. You're talking about the journey and this, you're going to take people through that journey, the struggle that you went, and then in the end, how it all went good. If you look at the movie Lion King and many stories, this is the famous technique that is used from there. So can somebody tell me if they could recollect any stories? I just want a 15-second response. If you just raise your hand and then you can just unmute yourself and tell me what do you recollect based upon this technique. Somebody want to speak?
Yeah, I can speak.
Sure, Bharat.
I remember a story of my college days, my first date, and how I messed it up.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Well, I wasn't going to do a personal story, but I was going to say the Odyssey and then Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The movie that's kind of based on the Odyssey definitely follow this.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No problem. So those are a few examples, and you can always recollect from your life too, or maybe from other famous folk tales. Now, second technique is when you take people at the peak and then you drop down. Okay. Now, this is some tension that you build up. Let us say you're taking the hero or the main character of the story through a journey. You're taking the war scene. If you look at this movie Troy, when exactly some plot is built up, and that plot, when they enter that fort, so what does it happen? You talk about all that suspense, and then meet a heroine, the meet, and you go through the peak of the emotions, what's happening, what they're going through, and then suddenly drop the ball. If you look at all the TV drama or series in your Netflix or Prime, every episode takes you through this journey and then it just drops. So it can be a happy ending. It need not be a happy ending. It's up to what the narration is. If you have seen the first technique, the story ends with always with a happy ending, or through, irrespective of the struggle that the person, the main character, went through. But here, it is just showing the emotional conflicts, that it just goes and then just drops up. Okay, it all shows, like, for example, if the person you're trying to talk about the challenges that a person went through, or want to build some tension in your story, and also you want to bring a conclusion. You need to relieve that tension. So you're building a tension, but then you dropping it off to relieve that tension. You're giving a conclusion. It's not like a suspense story that you leave the audience with being at suspense, that they don't know what's going to happen. So you need to tell them what it really happens. In the end, you're leaving them with a conclusion. So quickly, can somebody tell me what they can recollect when I talk about this mountain technique?
So I can maybe comment. So typically, as you rightly said, Raghu, most of the dramas, the serial or movies, they have this building up the tension, and towards the end of it, they get the resolution. But I've also seen another technique where towards the end of it, they will make it seem like, okay, it's the end, but they will also sow the seed of the next tension. So as it goes up and down, and then you see a glitch going up, like, oh, was that truly the ending? Maybe there's something more coming.
Thank you, Bish. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think an example I can think about is Korean dramas, wherein it's always like a sad ending. It's not an always happy ending at the end. So they build up the tension, and then towards the end, it's not a very good conclusion.
Thank you, Grace. Kenneth.
What I think is interesting about the mountain is it's probably the arc that, like, as you notice, every sitcom uses. And that's why the characters can't experience any real growth, because they always have to end up exactly where they started, because the tension comes right back down to right where they started. And they never change anything. It's always same cast, the same people. And sad to see why.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Diana says it reminds her the story of Mary Poppy, the drama and the hospital scenes. Thank you very much, Diana. Now coming to the other technique, the next technique is nested loops. Nested loops, if you look at the way that it is there, the central message is in center. And then you keep going to the different narratives. So let me tell you something like, so for example, you've seen movies as stories where about the same scenario, what does three different people have to say? Let me say that I, Kenneth, and Grace have met. The narrative goes like, what did Kenneth went through that period of time? What did Grace went through that period of time? And Raghu, when he comes in, what is he bringing? What was his life like? And then it goes around the scenario, what is presently happening. And what is that based upon their lives or what they went through, what is that they are going to achieve now? And then bringing it to a central message, a common message. You must have seen some movies who specifically go into, or some stories or some speeches when they talk about different people or different stories based upon this. But the central message is one thing. It is that you are bringing different narrations. Or it can say that when you want to talk about a different, let us say, plus and minus of one topic, how does it happen? The politics, or maybe let us say that you're trying to evaluate something, and based upon that you're bringing the plus and minus of the stories which are related to that, and you do that. Okay, for example, when you want to inspire the audience or come to a conclusion about something, that you use this technique of the nested loops. It's just like going loops, and then coming to one center point. Or when you want to use analogies and coming to a central concept, this is where you use this technique. Or let us say that you want to show a piece of wisdom, but pass along with stories which are connected in a way, and then you pass that message. So these are the scenarios that they use it. So what do you think? If you can recollect, what is it that you can recollect when I said nested loops? Anybody who wants to talk about it? Any stories or any examples that they can think of?
I think this is a very, very challenging narrative to potentially work in. My favorite example in contemporary film is a new, I'll call it classic, called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a new movie out. I highly recommend if you haven't seen it, but it definitely utilized the nested loop. So I love that you brought a name to this. At the end, there's a scene where the characters are having a really large fight up a flight of stairs, and they have every single arc that they've kind of set up throughout the movie reach a culmination, reach a conclusion on the flight up the stairs. So they were definitely utilizing the nested loop.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Anybody who wants to talk about it? I want to make it narrative because you're all going to come up with one story shortly. Diana, you can type in the message. Thank you. Well, Diana is going to reply. Let's move to the next technique. Okay. Is this spark lines, just like sparks that you can give to your story? How do you make it? How do you add sparks your story? It's more like you bringing the hot topics in your story, the hot topic which is in line with the society right now. Let us say someone talking about corona, somebody talking about the vaccine, which are controversial topics. Somebody talks about the discrimination that's happening in the current society. And then based upon that, they go around the stories, but at the same time, they go through these two angles, the hope and the reality. I hope that this world becomes a better place where nobody discriminates anybody. And second time, I'm going to talk about the reality where what's happening. Let us say I'm going to talk about the hope, but same time I'm going to also talk about what's happening in reality. They keep connecting this back. It's more like if you see some social activists who are talking about the social causes around in the society, and they're talking on the podium, and then they're trying to inspire, same time just trying to just get people the message, and same time asking them to raise for the cause and also do some action. When you want your audience to take some action, but not like a regular speech, understand, these people are just putting everything on fire, trying to raise people, trying to talk to them. At the same time, the hope, the reality. We have seen speech of John Martin Luther King. If you see speeches of famous people who wanted to bring a social norm, after asking people to raise for the cause, where they are just injecting the hope. At the same time, they're talking about the reality, what's happening. This is a spark line, and this should be used when you want to motivate the audience and same time take an action, not just anything. And trust me, these are one stories which keeps the society on fire. Same time, you're also creating hope and excitement. It's just about high emotional. You let audience go through number of emotions at the same time. And last is when you want to create followers. Of course, this is what the politicians and the motivational speakers do. Give some examples what you hear about this sparkline technique in your real life, or maybe let's talk about the TV series or stories or the speeches that you heard from other people. Can you outline what you heard on basis of this technique? Kenneth, Grace, Piyush?
It reminds me of a TED Talk, like every TED Talk ever. That's my reaction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it reminds me when politicians get their first time to speak up after they win an election. So they would have this speech about what their plans are for the government that they are leading and what's their hope for the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the politician's speech or some of the famous speeches, the way they start is the hope, like this is where we would like to be. And then they come back to reality, like this is where we are at. And then they probably talk about how do we get from here to there.
Right. Exactly. If any perfect politician speech is where you see this technique. They try to touch people's sentiments, bringing them to a place, I can do this. Or rather, the way John Martin Luther King that they said, I dream of a situation. And when even the saints are so-called saint or so-called the social activists who keep talking about this situation, they touch your sentiments by talking about the problem or the actual reality at the same time, bringing you to the emotion where the hope that they can bring in the society. Okay, that's the Diana has replied to the previous question about the nested loops. She tells that it reminds her of the scary movie where the scene is at the dark midnight and there was a guy and an old lady. Thank you, Diana. Now, going to the next technique. If you want audience to just jump in and be with you from the beginning, okay, and then you make audience stand, or rather just sit there in the edge in a seat. This is a technique that you use just from the beginning. You involve them and it goes into suspense story. You're building that and then you make them be with you from the beginning till the end. This is just like the flow of emotions and continuous. You're hinting at something that they're going to happen, the unexpected or whatever bizarre, you're going to hint at. You're keeping hinting at it, but same time you're not going to come to the top, the center message. You just go flow through that, and in the end, you give the message or whatever the incident is going to happen. For example, if we're going to talk about an accident, or rather that you see in the news channel, how they narrate, right? They're going to keep hinting at in the end, they talk about what really happened. Or rather, some shows that I've seen, after the break, they keep shouting and they keep talking about it. But they come to the point after they keep narrating all that they have to. But remember one thing, this cannot be a lengthy story here. It has to be a short story. You cannot just drag on for a long period. You cannot keep the audience with you because of the suspense. Once you keep dragging, people lose their interest. You know what happened today in my school? I went through this, I went through this, I went through this. Keep talking, but then if you are not able to hold it for long, if you keep holding it for longer, the audience loses. Just leave it. You don't want to hear it. Okay. The uses are the best uses is when you want people when you want people to pay attention from the beginning, when you started, and then when people just keep craving for a resolution, or something should happen, that the resolution has to come, or at least the end of the story. Doesn't matter whether you're going to narrate through a story where it is with a happy ending or a sad ending. Okay. And then when people go through each and every detail or every moment of your story, when you want people to pay attention to that, this is when you are going to use this technology, rather technique, sorry. So what does it recollect you when I say in media res? What does it remind you of? Any incident or story? Anybody who
Yeah, I
wants to
would
talk about it?
a mini version of a TED Talk, like typically, like what we talk about, any interesting talk, they have some action, and then you need a hook, like maybe a story, and then you talk about something. So the attention span of people is like very limited, maybe 60, 90 seconds. So if you can have one interesting fact every 90 seconds, then you can prolong this thing. But agreed that that's an interesting technique that works for a short story.
Thank you. Anybody who wants to mention about it?
I have an experience. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you. I have an experience of a speech that I made, and I started off with my little toddlers saying they will not eat chicken again, and they would not trust us with animals again. And so I described what happened when their grandmother gave them 3 chicken as gifts. We kept the chickens, and after some time, we needed dinner, and we slaughtered the chickens without the consultation of our toddlers. And they were heartbroken. And they had already given the chicken names. Those were their dear pets. I remember seeing them having a burial ceremony where they grabbed the feet of the chicken and had a serious funeral. When I shared that story, the purpose of my speech was to alert parents to be sensitive to the modern day toddlers and children that they have, to understand their needs. So I kept going and going and going. And the last part of that was how my cow gave birth to a beautiful, what do they call them? A little cattle. And that was also a family affair, and the children were involved, and they used the technique again, which this time I had to listen to. One of them said, "Mommy, we have to tell Hazel to push." So we all started, "Hazel, push, Hazel, push, Hazel, push." And the cow actually delivered the little calf. So first of all, my audience was hooked on the fact that my children had expressed disgust, expressed disappointment in us as parents, that they wouldn't trust us with their little chickens, which we turned into dinner. So my experience was that they being hooked at something that was culturally different. You know, how are you trying to make them pets, dear pets, that have to be kept? That's food. When I see chicken, I see food. So my perspective was to bring that. And I found that this was, now that I'm seeing it, it was a media's res in the beginning. I don't know if it's applicable, but that's how my experience was.
Absolutely. I would say that this is a technique that you use in a story. Kept your audience with you, and in the end, you relieved them with the story of the cow, the birth of the new calf. This is the petal structure is something that I love. We have seen the narrated, the loop, the nested loops. The technique was like you're revolving around but different stories. But when it is the multiple stories, linked stories to a central message, this is a technique that I am fond of using in my stories. You keep telling a story and then you come back to the message. A story, come back. A story, come back. A story, come back. Now this is when you want, or rather you have a central message. You're giving an evidence in the form of stories. You narrate a story and then you link it back to the message. Narrate another story and link it back to this message. When you want to hook audience to a central message, but at the same time giving that with different versions of that message. For example, when I talked about one of my speeches, one of my speeches is about freedom. Are you really free and independent? Was my question that I kept asking audience. At the same time, I went through 3 different stories in my own life. And I used that to bring back audience. I gave one first story from my childhood about the way that I was not given freedom to choose a religion of my choice. And then I asked the same question. Second version is when I faced discrimination at my workplace because I was stuttering. And then I asked the same question. And third thing is, I talked about the way that somebody questioned me just because they were buying, rather they were prospective buyer for my property. They asked my caste, and that day I felt offended. Why does it have to talk about my caste or creed when we are just dealing in the property? And then I link back that as a society that we are failing because we are trying to judge or trying to make biases for others. But what we generally have to do is just treat each other as equals. So I try to bring a message there in one of my speeches. I'm just trying to dig into that and trying to give you examples how it can be done. This technique is best when you want to hook up the audience with the different stories, but as one central idea, and how different scenarios of the same thing. For example, I try to show different aspects of freedom, but then how it was being done in actual life, where we're just making biases and then discriminating people. This can also happen that when you want, then you can have on the stage when 3 different people can talk about their story, but linking it back to the same message. So if you're having a show, it's not exactly a speech, but if you are using a speech, you talk about different anecdotes or stories, and then you link it back to the main message or the central message that you have for the audience. What does it remind you when I ask you about petal structure? Apart from my story I mentioned, does it remind of any other thing for you? No problem. Thank you. Diana has replied for the media arrest technique. She says that she gets a call from the black older man trying to out him as very hard. an ambulance guy took him to the hospital. Thank you very much, Diana. Now we have seen different techniques. So let me go through the each technique once more. Monomyth, a story of a person, a hero, going from the comfort zone to a place where they are uncharted waters. They don't know anything, and then they come back with the strength to the original place. Mountain, going to the emotional peak and then dropping them back. And next thing is nested loop, where you talk about different, sorry, excuse me. You talk one central message, but then you talk about different stories that are linking back to it. And then spark lines, where you're going high and low, talking about the hope and reality, and then trying to inject a message or trying to make people follow you. In media res, where you have the suspense from the beginning, but at the end you relieve them. It has to be a very short story that you need to be reminded of. The peta structure, different stories of the same message. You're linking them, but they have to be linked to the central message, but it can be of different people or the same person, but different aspects of the same message that you're trying to bring in. So these are few techniques that you can use in storytelling. Now let's do an exercise. I want to make the breakout room and then assign you. We'll have a 5 minutes breakout room, and then we'll have 2 breakout rooms. I'm sending by random. I asked to come with a story. I will give you about 3 minutes. 3 minutes is good, or do you want 5 minutes? Can someone reply? 5. Okay. So you can pick up your heroes are one that can lead this effort. Come and narrate the story in 5 minutes.
Hey, Raghu. I actually clicked the button the moment it showed up. Can you hear me, Raghu? Raghu, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Piyush. Are you able to hear me?
Yes. So we heard the instructions partially, and we sort of imagined stuff around it to create the story. So if we
No problem.
mess something up, apologies in advance.
That's fine. It's completely just an exercise. And then we are just trying to see we're able to get what I mentioned. So who is going to talk from the first room?
Are we first room or room two?
I believe you were room 2.
Room two, okay.
Room 1, I remember Rosemary in that room.
Yes, Linda will be speaking on the rooms we have.
Wonderful. Linda will be speaking from room 1. And who is
Yes.
representing room 2?
That would
In my room was Marie, myself, Rosemary, and Deanna. And we chose.
Linda, one minute. I'm seeking who is going to talk from the room 2. Is it you?
Yeah, that would be, thank you.
Wonderful. So I'll let room 1 start, and then the time is 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Is it fine?
Are we supposed to tell what our method
Technique.
of?
Right. You're going to tell about which method or technique that you're going to use. It will be better. Or rather, you can analyze, or rather we can analyze after you mention, but one
Okay.
story. Okay.
All right.
I'll just say 1, 2, 3, start. Linda.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters. There is an organization called Help the Soldiers. And what this organization does is through Amazon, they have a patriotic blanket or several blankets that you can purchase and send those blankets over to soldiers who are in the military. This is a worthwhile cause. It's very close to my heart. And I feel that I'm able to help out a soldier by sending a blanket to that individual. And what you can do is go online to www.soldiers.org, and you can sign up to be a volunteer. And they have a list of projects that you can help with. And one that is close and dear to my heart is the blanket for a soldier. And this information you can find on the Amazon website. And through that website, through this organization, you can send a blanket to a soldier. And I would hope that each and every one of you would consider purchasing a blanket for a soldier. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you very much. You took about 1 minute 54 seconds. So what is this narration? Is it a story? And what was the technique that Linda has used? Somebody wants to speak up from room 2. Somebody wants to pick it up and mention, talk about it, Grace?
I am not sure what kind of but I think would be the first one that he used, that Linda used for that narration.
Okay. You mean Monamith?
Yeah.
Okay. Sangeeta, what do you think?
I'm not sure either. I can't think of which one it fits in which technique. It
No
is.
no problem. You get back to it. Now I want Piyush to narrate a story. Let me reset my time. 1, 2, 3. Piyush, your story.
Greetings, fellow Toastmaster. I'm going to talk about a very special character. I'm sure you can't guess it because this character is really special, but I'll give you hints along the way so that you can try to guess it. This character is a superhero from 90s. This character is similar to a Spider-Man character where he has superpowers, and he also has a character in a common life where he's a normal man, and he's actually less than average because people are always pushing him around, but he's not Superman. This guy does yoga, and that's how he acquired his superpowers. He helps people like any other superheroes. He has a costume, which is not as fancy as Spider-Man or He-Man. He shows his face though, like potentially, I think Superman shows his face. Right? But he's not Superman. He's from the land of India. He's from 90s. And his common man character is a newspaper guy with spectacles, right? People typically push around people who have spectacles, bully this type of person. And like Superman, he met some accident, but he had a guru who taught him yoga. And this hero from the story basically is for kids to let the kids know that if you have good routine, if you follow something regularly, practice yoga, do exercise, then that's when that will make you a superhero. If you haven't guessed it already, his name is Shaktiman, one of our favorite characters from 90s and my childhood. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Piyush. What was the technique that he used? We just talked about it a few minutes back. Yes, Linda.
I was guessing monomyth, maybe.
No, myth. Okay. Any other guesses? You see what Piyush did. He kept you in a suspense and then slowly started resolving it, relieving the suspense. And then in the end, he brought it to a stage where he relieved it completely. But he didn't drag it very long, but he just kept describing you thinking about who the heck is a person like Superman, and then his dressing sense is different from the actual Superman. And I kept thinking about it, right? This was the in media res.
Yep, I was just going to say, yep, I caught that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he used that technique and was successfully have used that. Piyush, I'm proud you were able to implement it in an actual story. Now coming back to Linda, she tried it, but it was more like an information, Linda. It didn't come as a story. What you could have used is you could have used the heist address, right? Where the sparklings about the story.
That's what I was doing.
Yeah, you could have used that, trying to talk about the hope and reality. How the military veterans are the military men who are not given the respect that they need, which is why today you're trying to ask people, or rather you're asking people to donate the blanket for the military. So you might bring that, the hope and reality. When you bring that, your story could have been more effective, a rather touching story. Okay.
Thank you.
I think today I was able to bring these techniques and then give you information. How can you build your story or your speeches where you want your stories to be inspiring people? I'm going to talk about story. 1 minute. Talk about some important techniques that you can use in your speeches to connect with audience or make your speeches more interesting. First technique that you can use is immerse your audience in a story. So bring in such interesting story where you can hook your audience throughout your speech. Second technique that you can hold your audience is by telling your personal story. When you tell your personal story, it is when you're bringing genuinity of your story, where people start trusting you. Okay, Piyush, I've seen you failing, and then I've seen you walking through that and then bringing your success. Give me 1 minute. My battery is running out. 1 minute.
Yeah, maybe these are some of the ideas if we can use in the
Right.
77 data challenge. Hey, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So when you use this personal story, for example, if the narrator tells you that he was a failure, but he came to be a successful person. As an audience, it gives us hope. When this person can do, why not me? When anyone can else do, why not me? This shows that you can do it. And same time, when somebody is telling a story, you may not believe. But when he mentions that, as a child, I was in a position where I cannot do things, where I used to do things, but now I'm able to do this. This shows that I start trusting him that he is telling the truth, is not just bragging about it. Now, other thing is where you need to build a suspense, where you build a suspense and then making people hooked to it. The same technique that today Piyush has used, or when we talked about in media res. And then talking about characteristic, bring them to life, add, or you can say the play, the dialogue between them. I'm going to talk about a situation. So if I relive that moment with you, it is a different thing. My uncle said that he felt so bad about so and so, or rather, I bring it to an emotion. Uncle, why is it like this? I don't think you're talking. When you bring it two different characteristics in a different tone, and when you bring that characteristic, it is a different the difference that you bring on, and it also goes in your mind instead of just a narration. Try to bring your characters to life with either using descriptive language of the situation or bringing the dialogue between you two here instead of just a narration. Show and don't tell is where you try to show them, just not telling. The same thing, just don't narrate. Try to show them. For example, I felt so bad. That moment, I felt so low in my life. See, I'm reliving my emotions. I'm not just narrating it. So show people your emotions or show the, the dialogue or what happened there instead of just narrating. Okay. Last but not least, this has failed me when I gave one speech, that speech about freedom. I was not able to bring a proper conclusion to that. And every time people were not happy with my speech because they didn't see a positive closing. So I had to work on it in several times to bring a positive end to it. If you're not relieving the audience with a positive outcome, people will not like it. Let us look at movies. The movies with happy ending have better reviews than the movies with a sad ending. Same thing with your speeches, same thing with your stories. Try to bring in happy ending and then you're going to relieve the audience and they're going to cherish those stories or those speeches for very long. I hope these techniques will help you to do better in your speeches, to do better in your stories. And then we had a great session today on your storytelling. I wish you all the best, and I will stop right now